You're listening to The Drowning Atlas, Book 2 of the Leviathans Covenant series. We hope you enjoy your journey. Chapter 1. The Admiralty's Pursuit. The fog clung to the Thames like a shroud, thick and unyielding, muffling the cries of gulls and the distant clamour of the docks. Sibylla Thorne stood at the window of her cramped workshop in the phantom cartography house, her fingers tracing the etched lines of a half-finished map. The ink shimmered unnaturally under the gaslight, currents that no ordinary mariner could chart. Phantom paths born of the Carrington storm's lingering curse. Her skin prickled, a familiar hum building in her veins, not from the chill seeping through the cracked panes, but from him. Abyssos. He stirred within her, a restless pulse of electricity coiling through her bioelectric field like a lover's whisper turned insistent. Since their binding in the storm's aftermath, he had become both her anchor and her storm, his essence flickering in and out of corporeality through her body. She closed her eyes, feeling the faint crackle along her nerves, the way her heartbeat synced to the rhythm of distant waves. But tonight, the hum carried urgency, a warning that slithered up her spine. "Sib," his voice echoed in her mind, not in words, but in electromagnetic pulses that vibrated her bones. "They come. The iron hunters." She turned from the window, her dark hair falling loose from its pins, framing a face etched with the weariness of a woman who had seen too much of the sea's secrets. At 28, Sibylla was no delicate Victorian flower. Her hands bore the calluses of ink and copper wire, her eyes the sharp glint of one who mapped the unmappable. "Who?" she murmured, though she already suspected. The door to her workshop rattled under a heavy fist. "Miss Thorne, open up. Admiralty business." Her heart lurched. She crossed the room in swift strides, barring the door with a brass rod scavenged from an old ship's mast. Through the peephole, she glimpsed uniformed men, their faces stern beneath oilskin hats, lanterns casting long shadows on the fog-draped wharf. "Abyssos," she breathed, her voice low. "We have to go. Now." His response was a surge of heat through her core, possessive and fierce. "Anchor me. Let me shield you." There was no time for the full ritual, the one that left her trembling and spent, her body a conduit for his plasma form. But partial anchoring would suffice. For now. Sibylla stripped off her corset with practiced efficiency, the whalebone creaking in protest as it fell to the floor. Her chemise clung to her skin, damp from the humid air. She stepped to the copper-lined basin in the corner, filled with salt water drawn from the Thames that morning. Dipping her hands in, she felt the spark ignite. "Come to me," she whispered, her voice husky with the anticipation that always preceded their union. The water came alive, arcs of blue lightning dancing across the surface. Abyssos poured into her, his essence flooding her senses. Pain lanced through her nerves first, sharp as a harpoon, then pleasure bloomed in its wake, hot and unrelenting. She gasped, arching against the basin's edge, her fingers gripping the rim as his form coalesced. Not fully solid yet, but enough. A shimmering silhouette of crackling energy, humanoid and towering, his eyes glowing like storm-lit depths. He reached for her, his touch a cascade of static that set her skin aflame. "Sib," he pulsed, the vibration rumbling through her chest. Their binding was intimate, raw, each anchoring stripped her bare, demanding surrender. His hand trailed down her arm, sending jolts that pooled low in her belly. She pressed into him, craving the release that came with channeling his power, even as it eroded her humanity a little more. But the pounding on the door grew frantic. "Break it down!" a voice barked. Sibylla pulled away, breathless, her body thrumming with residual charge. "Later," she promised, grabbing her satchel of maps and instruments. Abyssos dimmed, retreating into her like a shadow, his presence a warm coil in her blood. She slipped out the back, into the labyrinth of alleys behind the docks. The fog swallowed her footsteps as she made for the hidden berth where their escape vessel waited. A sleek smuggling cutter named the Phantom's Whisper, procured through Effie's shadowy contacts. The deckhands, a ragtag crew of storm-touched sensitives, nodded grimly as she boarded. "Cast off," she ordered, her voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through her. The sails unfurled with a snap, catching the fitful wind as the cutter slipped into the Thames's murky flow. London receded, its gaslights blurring into a golden haze, but Sibylla knew pursuit was inevitable. Abyssos's warning had been clear. The Iron Hunters. Across the city, in the fortified halls of the Admiralty, Admiral Cornelius Flint paced the length of his command chamber. The room was a testament to Victorian ingenuity warped by obsession. Walls lined with Faraday cages humming with captured electrical anomalies, maps of the Atlantic scarred with red pins marking leviathan sightings. His left arm, a prosthetic of brass and leather, whirred softly with each step, a constant reminder of the storm that had claimed his flesh. The Carrington event had not just disrupted telegraphs, it had birthed monsters from the deep. And one, in particular, had marked him. Flint's encounter off the Azores, chasing a phantom current that led to a surge of living lightning, had left him scarred, his crew drowned in electrified waters. But from the ashes, he had risen, forging the electric division to harness these entities for the Empire. Now, reports from his spies confirmed it. Sibylla Thorne, the cartographer whose maps had predicted the storm's paths with uncanny accuracy, was bound to one of these leviathans. Abyssos, they called it. A micro-entity of sentient electricity anchored through her body. The thought ignited a fury in Flint's chest, hot as the burns that twisted his skin beneath his uniform. "Vendetta," murmured Captain Hargrove, his aide, standing rigidly at attention. Flint halted, his good hand clenching into a fist. "Not mere vendetta, Captain. Destiny. This Abyssos is the key to unchaining the seas for Britain. Thorne's conductivity makes her the perfect vessel. We capture her, we control the leviathans. No more storms ravaging our fleets, no more Yankee upstarts challenging our supremacy." His eyes gleamed with fanatic zeal. The loss of his arm was no tragedy. It was baptism. He had felt the power then, raw and oceanic, and vowed to bend it to his will. Like Marduk dismembering Tiamat, he would carve the seas into tools of empire. "Signal the Iron Fleet," Flint commanded. "All vessels to mobilize. The Phantom's Whisper has been sighted departing the harbor. Intercept in the channel. Use the cages. Trap the bitch and her pet before they reach open water." Hargrove saluted, wires humming as messengers scurried to relay the orders. Outside, the docks erupted into controlled chaos. Ironclad ships groaning under steam, their hulls reinforced with conductive netting, crews barking orders as searchlights pierced the fog. The Iron Fleet, Flint's pride, was the armada of predatory vessels, designed to ensnare the ethereal. Flint turned to the window, watching the behemoths slide into the Thames. "Run, Miss Thorne," he muttered, a predatory smile curling his scarred lips. "The sea is mine." The English Channel stretched before the Phantom's Whisper like a restless beast, waves chopping under a sky bruised with impending storm. Sibylla gripped the wheel, her knuckles white, as the cutter cut through the swells. Salt spray stung her face, mingling with the sweat of exertion. Abyssos thrummed within her, his agitation mirroring her own, a low-frequency buzz that set her teeth on edge. "They're close," he pulsed, urgency sharpening the sensation. She scanned the horizon, the fog parting just enough to reveal silhouettes on the water. 3 ships, hulking and angular, their prows slicing the waves with mechanical precision. Ironclads, belching smoke from funnel stacks, their decks bristling with cannon, and what looked like coiled nets of copper wire. "The Iron Fleet," one of the deckhands, a wiry lad named Jem, spat over the rail. "Flint's devil dogs, heard they cage lightning like it's a bloody hound." Sibylla's stomach twisted. In the whispers of London's underbelly, tales of the electric division had spread. Experiments on sensitives, leviathans bottled like genies. Flint's vendetta was no secret. The Admiral blamed the entities for his maiming, and now sought to enslave them all. "Hard to starboard!" she shouted, yanking the wheel. The cutter heeled sharply, sails straining as they tacked toward a bank of fog rolling in from the north. Cannon fire boomed, distant but closing. A shot splashed harmlessly astern, but the message was clear: surrender or sink. Abyssos surged, demanding release. "Let me fight." "Not yet," she hissed, though the temptation clawed at her. Full anchoring here, in open water, would drain her, leave her vulnerable. But evasion alone might not suffice. The lead ironclad, a monstrous vessel christened HMS Thunderer, gained ground, its searchlight sweeping the waves like accusatory fingers. "Heave to, Phantom's whisper," an amplified voice bellowed through a speaking trumpet. "By order of Admiral Flint, you are under arrest." Sibylla ignored it, plotting their course by instinct, and the phantom currents only she could sense. The channel was a web of eddies, some natural, others twisted by the storm's legacy. If she could lure them into a rogue current. Another broadside, closer this time. The cutter shuddered as a cannonball grazed the stern's splintering wood. Shouts rose from the crew as they scrambled to repair. "Enough!" Sibylla growled. She relinquished the wheel to Gem and ducked below decks into the captain's cabin. The space was cramped, lit by a swinging lantern, the air thick with the scent of tar and brine. Stripping once more, she lay back on the narrow bunk, her body exposed to the cool air. "Anchor me fully, Abyssos. We fight as one." His response was immediate, a torrent flooding her. Pain ripped through her first, electric fire searing her veins, but she welcomed it, arching into the agony. Pleasure followed, building like a squall, waves of ecstasy crashing over her as his essence knit into her flesh. Her skin glowed faintly, blue veins pulsing visibly beneath the surface. Abyssos manifested beside her, his form solidifying into a lithe, muscular figure of plasma and shadow, water dripping from his skin like liquid night. His eyes locked on hers, stormy and intense. "Mine," he rumbled, the word a thunderclap in her mind. He covered her then, his touch igniting every nerve. Their union was more than survival. It was the core of their bond. Pleasure and power intertwined. His mouth claimed hers in a kiss that sparked and sizzled, tongues of lightning dancing. She moaned, fingers digging into his ephemeral back, pulling him deeper. He thrust into her, not with flesh, but with current, a pulsing surge that filled her completely. Each movement sent shockwaves of bliss through her body, her cries muffled against his shoulder. The rhythm built, urgent and evasive as their flight, her hips rising to meet him. Orgasm shattered her like lightning striking the mast, her body convulsing as his power peaked, anchoring him fully. When it subsided, they rose together, Sibylla clad only in a loose shirt, Abyssos in his crackling form. She felt invincible, his strength coursing through her limbs. Back on deck, the ironclads loomed closer. Abyssos leaped to the prow, raising his arms. The sea responded, waves rearing like serpents. He channeled the channel's currents, twisting them into a maelstrom that battered the lead ship. The Thunderer listed, its Faraday nets sparking futilely against the onslaught. Cannon fire answered, but Abyssos deflected the shots with barriers of plasma, bolts arcing back to singe the enemy decks. Sibylla directed the cutter through the chaos, the crew whooping as they slipped past. But two more ironclads flanked them, nets deploying like fishing lines. "Now!" she cried. Abyssos unleashed a bolt, striking the nearest ship's mast. It exploded in a shower of sparks, the vessel veering wildly. The second fired grapples, iron hooks biting into the cutter's rail. Sibylla grabbed a cutlass, slashing at the lines as Abyssos hurled lightning. The grapple snapped, but not before a boarding party swung across. Navy men in insulated suits, rifles crackling with electrical charges. The deck became a battlefield. Gem parried a blow, while Sibylla dueled a burly sailor, her blades singing through the air. Abyssos was a whirlwind, his form blurring as he electrocuted foes, their screams lost in the storm. One boarder lunged at Sibylla, rifle butt raised. She dodged, but he clipped her shoulder, pain blooming hot. Abyssos roared, interposing himself, his touch vaporizing the man in a flash. "Enough!" Flint's voice boomed from the Thunderer, now righting itself. "Surrender the Leviathan, Thorn, and you live." She laughed bitterly, blood trickling from her lip. "He's no pet to be caged, Admiral, and neither am I." Abyssos pulled her close, his energy shielding them as he summoned a rogue wave. It crashed over the ironclads, swamping their decks, shorting their mechanisms. The Phantom's whisper surged forward, breaking free into open channel. The ironclads faltered, smoke rising from their hulls, but Sibylla knew this was only the beginning. Flint's vendetta burned as fiercely as the lightning in her veins. As dawn broke, painting the waves gold, Abyssos faded back into her, spent but sated. "We are free," he pulsed softly. "For now," she replied, steering toward the horizon. The drowned cities called, a permanent anchor for him, and perhaps salvation for them both. But the sea was vast, and hunters never far behind. In the Admiralty's war room, Flint slammed his fist on the table, charts scattering. "Regroup. Track their current. They head south, toward the Med. Ready the full fleet. This pursuit ends with her in chains." His scarred face twisted in rage and resolve. The Leviathans would bow to Britain, or the oceans would drown in fire. Chapter 2. Allies in the Shadows. The salt-laced wind of Whitby whipped through the narrow streets, carrying the faint tang of ozone and despair. Sibylla Thorn pulled her woolen cloak tighter around her shoulders, the fabric chafing against the raw patches of skin where Abyssos's essence had last arced through her veins. It had been 3 days since their frantic escape from the London docks, the Iron Fleet's lanterns blooming like malevolent fireflies in the rearview of their stolen cutter. Now, under the shadow of the crumbling abbey ruins that loomed over the town, she sought sanctuary in the one place that might understand her affliction, or her gift. The Whitby Electric Asylum squatted on the cliffs like a forgotten beast, its Gothic spires piercing the slate-grey sky. Once a whaling outpost, it had been repurposed after the Carrington storm, transformed into a labyrinth of Faraday cages and humming galvanic batteries. Here, the storm-touched were studied, their bodies prodded like specimens under the guise of science. Sibylla's boots crunched on the gravel path as she approached the iron gates, her heart pounding in rhythm with the distant crash of waves against the harbor below. Abyssos stirred within her, a low vibration in her bones, his presence a constant hum since their last anchoring. "We are close." His voice crackled in her mind, not words but pulses of electricity that danced along her nerves. "The healer waits." She flashed the forged letter from Effie at the gatekeeper, a gaunt man whose eyes flickered with the unnatural blue of chronic exposure. He waved her through without a word, his fingers twitching as if conducting an invisible orchestra. Inside, the asylum was a warren of echoing corridors, lit by gas lamps that sputtered in the damp air. The walls were lined with corkboards pinned with sketches of lightning-struck sailors and diagrams of neural pathways aglow with phantom currents. Sibylla's skin prickled. This place reeked of confinement, of knowledge twisted into control. But Effie was here, and with her, hope. Dr. Euphemia Blackwater's office was tucked at the end of a restricted wing, behind a door etched with protective runes, half Victorian science, half ancient ward. Sibylla knocked, her knuckles buzzing with residual charge. The door swung open, and there stood Effie, her silver-streaked hair pinned in a severe bun, spectacles perched on the bridge of her aquiline nose. At 45, she looked every bit the rogue scholar, her linen blouse stained with ink and what might have been seawater. "Sibylla," Effie breathed, pulling her into a fierce embrace. The older woman's arms were strong, corded from years of wrestling with experimental apparatus. "You've come at last. The telegrams from London were frantic. Flint's hounds on your trail?" Sibylla nodded, stepping inside and closing the door. The room was a chaos of bookshelves groaning under tomes on electromagnetism and forgotten mythologies, a massive oak desk cluttered with astrolabes and coiled copper wires. In the corner, a saltwater tank hummed softly, its surface rippling with contained energy. Abyssos perked up at the sight, sending a warm tingle through Sibylla's core. "He's with me," Sibylla said, tapping her temple. "We barely made it out. The electric division has the harbors locked down. We need your help, Effie, to get to the drowned cities." Effie's eyes sharpened, flicking to the tank. "Abyssos, the micro-leviathan himself. I've read your letters, but seeing the bond, it's extraordinary." She gestured to a worn armchair. "Sit. Tell me everything. And yes, I have what you seek. But first, we need more than just maps. We need allies, conductors to share the burden. Your body can't hold him alone forever." As Sibylla recounted the chase, the crackling pursuits across the channel, the way Abyssos had surged through her to repel a boarding party, Effie's face grew grave. The doctor paced, her skirt swishing against the Persian rug. "The weaponization has escalated," she said. "Flint's not just hunting you, he's capturing sensitives, forcing bindings with lesser entities. The seas are alive with them now, fragments of the storm's wake. But the drowned cities, they hold the key to a true anchor, one that won't consume you." Sibylla leaned forward, her voice urgent. "Then let's plan. But the voyage, through the Mediterranean, evading the Iron Fleet. We'll need a route that's hidden. Ancient paths." Effie smiled faintly, unlocking a hidden drawer in her desk. From it, she withdrew a leather-bound atlas, its pages yellowed and brittle, edges singed as if by lightning. "These are Phoenician charts, smuggled from a dig in Carthage. They map the ghost currents, the electromagnetic veins beneath the waves. With them, we can slip past patrols like shadows. But to navigate them safely, we need a network, a chain of conductors to amplify and distribute Abyssos' power. You can't do it solo. It'll burn you out." A knock interrupted them, sharp and insistent. Effie straightened. "That'll be her. Maris Deepwell. One of my patients, but more than that. She's shown flickers, sensitivity, untapped. If we can awaken it." Sibylla's pulse quickened. Abyssos hummed approval, a spark leaping to her fingertips. The door opened to reveal a woman in her mid-20s, her dark hair cropped short, eyes like polished obsidian. Maris moved with the wary grace of someone who'd learned to dodge blows, her simple muslin dress patched and faded. She was no fragile inmate. There was steel in her posture, forged in the brothels of Whitby's underbelly before the storm had driven her here. "Doctor," Maris said, her voice low and melodic, laced with a northern lilt. "You summoned me?" Effie gestured her in. "Maris, this is Sibylla Thorne. She's, like you, touched by the storm. We need your help." Maris's gaze locked on Sibylla, and for a moment the air thickened, charged. Sibylla felt it. A faint pull, like the prelude to a storm. Abyssos stirred, curious. "Touched how?" Maris asked, crossing her arms. "I've had enough prodding in this place. If it's another experiment—" "It's not," Sibylla interjected, standing. "It's freedom. From places like this, from men like Flint who want to cage what's inside us. I carry him, Abyssos, a leviathan born of the sea and lightning. He needs anchors, bodies to hold his form. Mine is fraying. Join us and we go to the drowned cities. We stop the weaponization. Together." Maris's eyes widened, but not in fear, in recognition. "The dreams," she whispered. "The blue fire in my veins at night. I thought it was madness." Effie closed the door, dimming the lamps to a soft glow. It's not madness, Maris, it's potential. Let us see. She arranged 3 copper basins on the floor, filling them with salt water from the tank. Coils of wire connected them, forming a crude circuit. A ritual of conduction. Sibylla will link with Abyssos, and we'll test if you can share the flow. It requires trust, intimacy, skin to skin. Maris hesitated, glancing between them. Sibylla extended a hand, her palm tingling. I've lost everything to this, she said softly. My work, my freedom. But with him, I feel alive. Let me show you. The room seemed to shrink as they knelt by the basins. Effie guided Maris's hands into the water, her own fingers brushing the wires to ground the circuit. Sibylla slipped her boots off, rolling up her sleeves, the scars of previous anchorings visible. Faint lightning branches etched into her forearms. She met Maris's eyes, a silent plea. Breathe, Effie murmured. Feel the salt, the pull of the tide within. Sibylla closed her eyes, summoning Abyssos. Come, she thought, and he responded, flooding her with warmth. Her skin glowed faintly, veins pulsing blue. She reached out, touching Maris's wrist. The contact was electric, a jolt that made Maris gasp, her body arching. It wasn't pain. It was awakening. Abyssos' essence leaped, threading through the water, seeking the new conduit. Maris's breath hitched, her free hand clutching Sibylla's arm. The air hummed, the lamps flickering as energy cycled between them. Sibylla felt it. The shared burden. Abyssos' vastness dividing, a tendril coiling into Maris like a lover's caress. Maris moaned softly, her eyes fluttering shut. The sensitivity bloomed in her, latent no more. Waves of pleasure rippled through the connection, erotic and raw, as Abyssos explored his new anchor. Sibylla's body responded instinctively, heat pooling low in her belly, nipples tightening against the fabric of her chemise. It was intimate, invasive, yet consensual. A dance of currents that blurred boundaries. Yes, Maris whispered, leaning closer, her lips parting. The ritual deepened. Effie watched, her own skin prickling with envy and awe. Sibylla guided Maris's hand to her throat, where the pulse thrummed strongest. Another surge, and Maris cried out, her body trembling as the electricity kissed her core, igniting nerves long dormant. It built to a crescendo, bodies slick with sweat, breaths mingling in the charged air. Abyssos reveled, his pulses translating to throbs of ecstasy that made Sibylla's thighs clench. Maris pressed against her, the friction deliberate now, hips grinding in rhythm with the flow. Effie steadied them, her voice an anchor. Hold it, channel it. You're the network now. When it crested, it was shattering. Maris shattered first, a keening gasp escaping as orgasm ripped through her, Abyssos' gift amplified by the circuit. Sibylla followed, waves crashing, her cry muffled against Maris's shoulder. Effie grounded the excess, sparks dancing on her fingertips. They collapsed, panting, the water still rippling. Maris's eyes opened, glowing faintly before fading. Gods, she breathed. That's power. Sibylla smiled, exhausted but elated. Welcome to the network, Maris. We're stronger now. Effie helped them up, her cheeks flushed. Indeed, the conductor triad is formed. With this, we can sustain him across the seas. She spread the ancient maps on the desk, the parchment unfurling like a sail. Inked lines depicted not just latitudes, but swirling vortices of current, paths where the electromagnetic ley lines converged, hidden from modern charts. See here, Effie pointed, tracing a route from Whitby down the Atlantic coast, skirting Gibraltar into the Mediterranean's heart. The Phoenician trade winds, but laced with ghost flows. We'll need a vessel, something fast, unremarkable. I have contacts in the smuggling rings. From there, to the Azores for resupply, then dive to the abyssal cathedral as a waypoint. The drowned cities lie beyond, preserved in stasis. Maris leaned in, her fingers brushing Sibylla's as they studied the maps. The touch lingered, a promise of more shared currents. "And the risks?" she asked, voice steady now. "High," Effie admitted. "Rival leviathans prowl these waters, drawn by the storm's echoes. Flint's fleet blocks the straits. But with the network, Abyssos can shield us, disrupt their instruments, cloak our wake." Abyssos pulsed agreement, a gentle wave through all three women, binding them. Sibylla felt hope flicker, brighter than the asylum's dim lights. For the first time since the binding, the weight in her chest eased. They were not alone. "When do we leave?" Maris asked, her chin lifting with newfound resolve. "Dawn," Effie said, rolling the maps. "I'll arrange the ship. Pack light. Salt, copper, and secrets. The sea calls us, sisters." As the night deepened, the three women worked in tandem, plotting contingencies, weaving talismans from wire and shell. Laughter broke the tension, stories shared over cold tea, Maris's tales of dockside survival, Effie's forbidden experiments, Sibylla's phantom mappings. Abyssos wove through them, a silent guardian, his essence a thread of electric intimacy. In the quiet hours, as Effie dozed over her notes, Maris turned to Sibylla. "That ritual, it changed me. I feel him, like a storm in my blood, and you." Sibylla cupped her cheek, thumb tracing the pulse point. "We're connected now, all of us. It won't always be so intense, but the pleasure, it's part of the power." Maris's lips curved, bold. She leaned in, kissing Sibylla softly, tasting of salt and spark. The kiss deepened, tongues tangling as Abyssos stirred, sending sparks along their skin. Effie stirred but said nothing, a knowing smile in her sleep. It was brief, a seal on their pact, but it ignited something fierce. Hope, yes, but also desire, the dark romance of their covenant blooming in the shadows. By first light they slipped from the asylum, cloaks drawn against the dawn chill. The harbor waited, a sloop named Siren's Whisper. Bobbing at anchor, its hull etched with protective sigils. As they boarded, Abyssos surged, the sea around them crackling with anticipation. The drowned cities beckoned, and with allies at her side, Sibylla felt ready to face the depths. Chapter 3. Rival Currents. The Mediterranean stretched before them like a vast, restless beast, its waters churning under a sky bruised with the promise of storm. Sibylla Thorne stood at the prow of the ebon tide, the sturdy brigantine that Dr. Effie Blackwater had procured through shadowy contacts in Whitby. Salt spray lashed her face, mingling with the faint crackle of static that always seemed to hum in the air around her now. It was Abyssos's whisper, his presence lingering in the bioelectric field of her body even when he was diffused into the ocean's currents. Behind her, the deck bustled with controlled urgency. Maris Deepwell, her newfound ally with the wary eyes of someone who'd seen too much of the world's underbelly, coiled ropes with efficient hands. Effie, ever the scientist, tinkered with a brass device at the helm, muttering about electromagnetic readings that spiked unnaturally in these waters. They were a ragtag crew, fugitives all, bound for the drowned cities, where ancient secrets might grant Abyssos permanence and spare them the Admiralty's iron grip. Sibylla's fingers traced the scarred leather of her cartographer's journal, its pages filled with sketches of phantom currents that only she could sense. The bond with Abyssos had sharpened her perceptions, turning the sea into a living map of pulses and surges. But it came at a cost. Each anchoring left her nerves frayed, her skin tingling with residual charge. She craved it, though, the rush of him filling her, the exquisite pain-pleasure that blurred the line between human and divine. A cry from the crow's nest shattered the moment. "Sail ho! Off the starboard bow! Salvage your markings!" Sibylla spun, her heart quickening. Through the haze, a ship emerged, its hull barnacle-crusted and sails patched like a beggar's cloak. The Morning Star she recognized from Effie's dossiers, a notorious vessel captained by Isaiah Coffin, a man who'd made his fortune plundering electromagnetic wrecks, since the Carrington storm. What was he doing here, in these contested approaches? "He's no friend," Maris said, joining her at the rail, her voice low and edged with old grudges. "Coffin's crew gutted my last ship for parts. Greedy bastard." Effie called from the helm, her spectacles glinting. "Signal them to heave to. We can't afford a fight. Not yet." But as the Morning Star closed distance, its cannons glinting ominously, no hail came. Instead, a guttural roar echoed across the waves, not from human throats, but from the sea itself. The water between the ships boiled, frothing with unnatural foam, and arcs of blue lightning danced along the Morning Star's rigging. Sibylla's skin prickled, a warning surge racing through her veins. Abyssos. She felt him stir within her, his voice a thunderous pulse in her bones. Rival. Hungering. It seeks flesh. On the deck of the approaching ship, figures scrambled, but one man stood unmoving at the forecastle. Isaiah Coffin, tall, broad-shouldered, his face weathered like driftwood, eyes wild with something inhuman. His hands clutched the rail, knuckles white, and then his body convulsed. A scream tore from him, raw and electric, as veins of plasma lit beneath his skin, crawling like veins of lightning. "Possessed," Effie breathed, her device whining in alarm. A competing entity, another fragment awakened by the storm's echo. The rival leviathan poured into Coffin, twisting him into a conduit. His eyes glowed azure, and from his mouth spilled not words but crackling discharges that lashed the air. The Morning Star surged forward, propelled by an unnatural wind that smelled of ozone and brine. "Hard to starboard," Sibylla shouted, but it was too late. Cannon fire erupted, the first broadside splintering the Ebontide's mainmast. Wood showered down, and Maris dragged Sibylla to cover as grapples flew across the narrowing gap, hooking into their hull. Chaos erupted. Pirates! Coffin's crew, eyes glazed with fear and fanaticism, swarmed aboard, cutlasses flashing in the dying light. The sea roiled, waves crashing over the rails as if the ocean itself waged war. Sibylla drew her pistol, firing into the fray, but her mind raced ahead. Abyssos needed form. Without it, they were prey. "Anchor me!" His plea thrummed in her blood, urgent, laced with the dark allure that always tempted her. "Let me taste the rival's current." She ducked behind a barrel, breath ragged as a boarder lunged at Maris. Effie blasted him with a jury-rigged shock prod, sending him convulsing into the foam below. "Sibylla, we can't hold them." "I know." Her hands trembled as she unbuttoned her blouse, exposing the salt-crusted lace of her corset. The ritual was intimate, dangerous. Performed in the heat of battle, it would be raw, unshielded. But there was no choice. She slipped below decks into the dim captain's cabin that Effie had converted into a makeshift sanctuary. Copper conduits lined the walls, wired to a saline bath in the corner. But time was short. Sibylla stripped swiftly, her clothes pooling like shed skin, the cool air raising gooseflesh on her bare limbs. The ship's roll mirrored her pulse, each creak a reminder of the skirmish above. Lying back on the narrow bunk, she parted her thighs, inviting the vulnerability that the anchoring demanded. Her fingers trailed down her body, tracing the faint scars from previous unions, marks where Abyssos's essence had burned through. She closed her eyes, summoning him. "Come to me." Bind. The air thickened, charged with static. Salt water seeped through the hull planks, coiling around her like liquid lovers' hands. It was him, Abyssos, gathering from the sea, drawn by her bioelectric call. A tendril of plasma licked her skin, cool and searing, tracing the curve of her breast, igniting nerves with electric fire. She gasped, arching as the current delved deeper, probing the heat between her legs. Pleasure bloomed, sharp and insistent, her body responding with a flood of her own conductivity. Fingers, ethereal, crackling, parted her folds, circling the sensitive pearl that throbbed in anticipation. Mine. Abyssos growled in her mind, his voice a bass rumble that vibrated her core. Sibylla's hips bucked, seeking more as the plasma thickened, forming a phallic surge that pressed against her entrance. She was wet, aching, the ritual's erotic charge amplifying every sensation. With a moan, she guided him in, the intrusion a blaze of ecstasy and agony. He filled her, stretching, pulsing with otherworldly rhythm, faster than any human lover, each thrust sending jolts that danced along her spine. Her climax built like a gathering storm, walls clenching around the electric invader. Abyssos fed on her release, her biofield anchoring his form. Sweat slicked her skin, mingling with the salt water that now lapped at her body as if the sea itself claimed her. She cried out, nails digging into the bunk as waves of orgasm crashed through her, binding him tighter. Above, the battle raged. Coffin's possessed form leaped aboard the ebon tide, his body a conduit of rival lightning. He hurled bolts that splintered wood and felled men, his crew chanting in mesmerized fervor. Maris parried a cutlass strike, her own latent sensitivity sparking faint defenses, sparks flying from her blade. Effie fired her prod again, but Coffin turned on her, eyes blazing. The current's call. Join or drown. His voice was layered, human and abyssal entwined. The rival leviathan spoke through him, hungry for dominance, its essence twisting Coffin's features into something grotesque, skin splitting with plasma veins. Then, a roar shook the ship. Abyssos erupted from below, his form coalescing in a burst of azure fury. No longer diffuse, he stood tall beside the cabin hatch, a humanoid silhouette of crackling plasma, muscles rippling with electric sinew. His eyes, Sibylla's eyes in a way, locked on the rival. Sibylla stumbled up, naked and trembling, wrapping a cloak around herself. The anchoring had drained her, left her legs weak, but the bond thrummed stronger, a shared pulse that let her feel Abyssos's rage as her own. "You dare invade my waters!" Abyssos's voice boomed, not from mouth, but from the air itself, discharging sparks that singed the sails. Coffin laughed, a wet crackling sound. "The sea is vast, brother. Room for many storms." He lunged, plasma claws extended, clashing with Abyssos in a maelstrom of light. The deck became their arena. Bolts arced between them, illuminating the chaos, crewmen diving overboard, Maris shielding Effie as rigging collapsed. Sibylla staggered forward, her hand outstretched, channeling residual energy to bolster Abyssos. Their bond pulled taut, like a live wire between hearts. She felt his strikes as phantom pains in her limbs, his fury igniting echoes of pleasure in her veins. Coffin was relentless, his possessed strength hurling Abyssos against the mast. Wood groaned, and Sibylla cried out, tasting blood on her lip. But the bond deepened in the adversity. Abyssos drew from her resilience, his form stabilizing, growing denser. With a surge, Abyssos countered, wrapping tendrils around Coffin's torso. The rival screamed, electricity warring in a blinding flare. "She anchors you, weakens you to flesh." "She frees me," Abyssos thundered, tightening his grip. The plasma battle peaked, currents colliding in a vortex that whipped the sea into frenzy. Sibylla poured her will into the link, her body igniting anew with shared ecstasy. It was intimate, this combat. Each clash a thrust, each deflection a caress. She collapsed to her knees, overwhelmed as the bond sealed tighter, Abyssos's essence etching deeper into her soul. Coffin convulsed, the rival leviathan fleeing his form in a spray of dissipating charge. He crumpled, human once more, eyes rolling back. His crew, freed from the trance, abandoned ship, the Morning Star. Drifting aimlessly as its supernatural wind died. Abyssos turned to Sibylla, his plasma form flickering, spent but victorious. He knelt, a hand, warm now, almost flesh, cupping her face. "Stronger." He pulsed. "We are one current." She leaned into him, exhausted, the erotic afterglow mingling with battle's ache. The sea calmed, But the skirmish had marked them, drawn blood, forged steel in their union. As Effie and Maris approached, tending wounds, Sibylla knew the drowned cities beckoned closer, fraught with rivals unseen. But for now, in the quieting waves, their bond hummed, a promise of tempests yet to come. The sun dipped low, painting the horizon in blood and gold as the ebon-tide limped onward. Isaiah Coffin lay bound below, muttering of currents that whispered his name. Sibylla watched him through the grate, pity warring with caution. The possession had ravaged him, leaving scars that mirrored her own. Effie examined him later, her instruments buzzing. The rival's gone, but echoes remain. He might be useful, or a liability. Maris snorted, sharpening her knife. Toss him. We've enough ghosts. Sibylla shook her head, feeling Abyssos' subtle approval in her veins. No. He saw the rival's hunger. Perhaps he can warn us of others. Night fell, the stars pricking the velvet sky like distant lighthouses. Sibylla retired to the cabin, her body still thrumming from the anchoring. Abyssos lingered, a soft glow in the corner, watching her undress. The ritual's intimacy lingered, stirring desire anew. She beckoned him, and he came, form solidifying into something almost tender. Their joining this time was slower, exploratory, lips of plasma brushing hers, hands of current mapping her curves. He entered her gently, building waves of pleasure that washed away the day's violence. In his embrace, Sibylla felt the bond solidify, threads of electricity weaving through her nerves. It was addiction, yes, but also power. As they crested together, she whispered into the dark. Whatever comes, we'll face it anchored. Abyssos' response was a pulse of affirmation, binding them deeper into the drowning atlas of their fate. Chapter 4. Descent to the Depths. The sea off the Azores was a restless beast, its surface whipped into froth by winds that carried the salt tang of forgotten tempests. The group's makeshift vessel, the Eel's Whisper, bobbed like a cork in the swells, its hull groaning under the weight of Effie's contraptions. Sibylla Thorne stood at the prow, her hands gripping the salt-crusted rail, eyes fixed on the horizon where the water deepened from azure to an impenetrable indigo. The air hummed with latent energy, a vibration she felt in her bones, as if the ocean itself whispered secrets meant only for her. Behind her, Dr. Euphemia Blackwater tinkered with the diving apparatus, a hulking assembly of copper coils, glass spheres, and rubberized suits laced with conductive filaments. Effie's spectacles perched on the tip of her nose, fogged slightly from the humidity as she muttered calculations under her breath. "The fields here are stronger than I anticipated," she said, her voice cutting through the wind. The Carrington echoes linger, amplified by the volcanic vents below. If my resonators hold, we'll breach the cathedral without frying ourselves. Maris Deepwell hovered nearby, her fingers twisting the hem of her oilskin coat. The former dockside worker, with her latent sensitivity to the electric currents, had proven invaluable since joining them in Whitby. But now, her face was pale, eyes wide with the enormity of what lay ahead. "And if they don't hold?" she asked, voice barely above the waves. Effie glanced up, a wry smile cracking her stern features. "Then we become part of the reef, my dear. But I've staked my reputation on worse gambles." Sibylla turned, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The skirmish with Isaiah Coffin's possessed ship still lingered in her muscles, a ache from the bioelectric surge she'd channeled to repel the rival leviathan. Abyssos stirred within her then, a crackle along her nerves. But now he was dormant, waiting for the anchor that only she could provide. Their bond had deepened since that battle, each anchoring pulling her closer to the edge of dissolution. Pleasure and pain intertwined, a siren's call she both craved and feared. "Abyssos senses it," Sibylla said softly, her hand pressing against her chest where the phantom hum resided. "The cathedral calls to him. To us." The Leviathan's voice echoed in her mind, Not words, but pulses. Electric Morse code that translated to urgency. Deeper. Home. Effie nodded, securing the final clasp on Sibylla's suit. The garment clung like a second skin, its filaments designed to amplify her conductivity while shielding her from the crushing depths. You'll need to anchor him fully once we're down there. The plasma pockets in the cathedral should sustain him, but without your field. I know, Sibylla interrupted, the weight of it settling like lead in her gut. Anchoring Abyssos meant surrender, her body as the conduit for his form. It meant ecstasy that bordered on agony, a merging that chipped away at her humanity. But for the drowned cities, for a permanent bind that might save them from Admiral Flint's hunters, she would endure. Maris stepped forward, her hand brushing Sibylla's arm. We're with you, Sib. All the way down. Her touch sparked a faint current, a shared sensitivity that bound the women like an invisible thread. The descent began at dusk, the sun bleeding red into the water as they donned their suits and helmets. Effie's device, a submersible bell powered by electromagnetic propulsion, lowered them into the abyss. The world above muffled, then vanished, replaced by the symphony of the deep. The creak of pressure against glass, the distant rumble of tectonic shifts, and the ever-present hum of charged waters. Sibylla's heart pounded as the bell pierced the surface, bubbles erupting around them like fleeing spirits. The pressure built. A vice on her chest, but the suits held, their filaments glowing faintly with borrowed energy. Abyssos stirred again, his presence coiling through her veins like liquid lightning. Now, he pulsed. Anchor me. She closed her eyes, focusing on the bioelectric field that defined her. In the privacy of her mind, she invited him in, her body arching involuntarily as the first surge hit. Pleasure bloomed low in her belly, a warm current that spread outward, igniting nerves she hadn't known existed. Pain followed, sharp and exquisite as his essence flooded her cells. She gasped, the sound echoing in her helmet, her hands clenching into fists as waves of ecstasy crashed over her. Effie's voice crackled through the suit's communicator. Steady, Sibylla. The field is stabilizing. We're at 200 fathoms. Maris's breath came in short bursts beside her. Gods, it's beautiful. Look at the lights. Bioluminescent creatures darted past the bell's viewport, jellyfish veils trailing ethereal glows, fish with eyes like lanterns piercing the gloom. But it was the seafloor that stole Sibylla's breath when they touched down. The abyssal cathedral rose from the silt like a drowned monument, its spires of coral-encrusted stone piercing the darkness. Arches vaulted toward the surface, etched with runes that pulsed with faint otherworldly light. This was no human ruin. It was a temple to the primordial, built by hands long turned to salt. The bell's hatch hissed open, and they stepped out into the plasma pockets, bubbles of breathable air sustained by the electromagnetic anomalies. The water lapped at their suits but didn't drown them. Instead, it caressed, charged with the same energy that coursed through Sibylla. Abyssos manifested fully now, his form coalescing from the salt water around her. He emerged as a humanoid silhouette of crackling plasma, veins of blue lightning forking across his translucent skin. His eyes, pools of stormy grey, locked onto hers, and she felt the pull, magnetic and inexorable. Sib, he murmured, his voice a rumble of thunder in her ears, though no sound waves carried it. It was direct, electric, bypassing the air. He reached for her, fingers trailing sparks along her arm. The touch sent shivers through her, a prelude to the deeper union they both craved. Effie adjusted her portable resonator, a backpack device humming with purpose. The cathedral's core lies ahead. Follow the primary archway. My instruments detect a nexus of fields, perfect for visions, if the legends hold. Maris nodded, her eyes reflecting the plasma glow. Legends of Tiamat's priestesses, binding the sea's wrath. Think we'll find answers, or just more ghosts? Both, likely, Sibylla replied, her voice husky from the anchoring. She took Abyssos's hand, the contact amplifying their bond. Heat built between them, a slow burn that promised more. They moved through the cathedral's halls, the plasma pockets shifting like living veils. Stone floors, worn smooth by eons of currents, crunched under their boots. Murals adorned the walls, faded depictions of a colossal serpent woman, her body a swirl of waves and storms, birthing worlds from her chaos. Tiamat, the first mother, dismembered by gods who feared her power. As they delved deeper, the air thickened with charge. Sibylla's skin tingled, every hair standing on end. Abyssos pressed closer, his form flickering with intensity. "The memories stir," he said, his free hand cupping her face. "Let me show you. Through me." She nodded, leaning into him. The anchoring deepened, no longer a mere sustainment, but a full immersion. Her body yielded, muscles relaxing as his essence poured into her. Pleasure spiked, sharp and insistent, centering between her thighs. She bit her lip to stifle a moan, but Maris and Effie pretended not to notice, their focus on the path ahead. The visions came unbidden, crashing over her like tidal waves. She saw Tiamat in her prime, a goddess of roiling seas, her form vast and serpentine, scales shimmering with the light of unborn stars. The waters were her blood, the storms her breath. She created without malice, birthing leviathans from her dreams, fragments of her consciousness scattered across the oceans. But then the gods came, Marduk and his kin, wielding thunderbolts forged from stolen skyfire. They feared her endlessness, her refusal to be tamed. The battle was cataclysmic. Tiamat's body torn asunder, her essence fragmented into the salt and currents. Abyssos was born from that shattering, a micro-leviathan carrying echoes of her rage and sorrow. Sibylla gasped, the vision pulling her under. Pain lanced through her as Tiamat's agony mirrored her own. The dismemberment a metaphor for the anchors that chipped at her soul. Yet pleasure wove through it, the goddess's creative force a sensual pulse, birthing life even in destruction. Abyssos held her, his plasma form solidifying against her. "Feel her," he whispered, his lips brushing her neck through the suit. The contact ignited her, currents arcing between them. She arched into him, the anchoring turning erotic, her body responding with a flood of heat. His hands roamed, tracing the filaments of her suit, each touch sending jolts of ecstasy that blurred the line between vision and reality. In the vision, Tiamat's remnants sought anchors, humans sensitive to the electric call, binding fragments into temporary flesh. But each binding was a sacrifice. The human consumed, the leviathan trapped. Failed unions littered the depths, souls dissolved into the sea's memory. Sibylla cried out, the climax of the vision merging with her own release. Waves of pleasure crashed, her nerves alight with Abyssos's power. He groaned, his form shuddering as he drew from her, their union a storm contained in flesh and plasma. Effie's voice broke through. "Sibylla! The Nexus! We've reached it!" She blinked, the visions receding like retreating tides. They stood in a vast chamber, the heart of the cathedral. Pillars of living coral framed a pool of swirling plasma, its surface reflecting not the chamber, but distant horizons. Beyond, through a fractured archway, lights flickered, submerged spires rising from the silt, cities preserved in electromagnetic stasis. "The drowned cities," Maris whispered, awe threading her words. "It's real. All of it." Abyssos released Sibylla slowly, his eyes dark with the shared intimacy. "The past warns us, but the future calls. We must go deeper." Sibylla straightened, her body humming with aftershocks. The visions had revealed the cost of permanence, the dissolution of self in the merge. Yet the glimpse of the cities promised hope, a place where bindings might endure without destruction. Effie consulted her instruments, nodding. The path leads there, but the currents grow unstable. We'll need another anchoring to proceed. Sibylla met Abyssos's gaze, the pull between them undeniable. Pain and pleasure, sacrifice and surrender. The depths awaited, and with them the unraveling of their fates. As they approached the archway, the plasma pool rippled, whispering echoes of Tiamat's voice. "Come, my children. Reclaim what was torn." The group stepped forward, the ethereal glow enveloping them, pulling them toward the drowned heart of the world. The chamber's air was thicker here, saturated with the scent of ozone and ancient brine, even through their suits. Sibylla's skin prickled as residual currents from the vision danced along her nerves, a lingering caress from Abyssos that made her thighs clench involuntarily. He walked beside her, his plasma form more defined now, edges sharpening into muscle and sinew borrowed from her bioelectric field. The anchoring had left its mark. She could feel him in every pulse of her heart, a second rhythm syncing with her own. Effie led the way, her resonator backpack whirring softly as it mapped the electromagnetic ley lines snaking through the stone. "Fascinating," she murmured, tracing a rune with gloved fingers. "These carvings aren't just decorative. They're circuits, etched by a civilization that understood conductivity before we dreamed of telegraphs. Tiamat's priests, no doubt, channeling her essence into the Earth's crust." Maris trailed behind, her steps cautious on the uneven floor. The plasma pockets here were larger, domes of air that expanded and contracted like breathing lungs. She reached out, touching the boundary where air met water. Tiny sparks leaped to her fingertips, eliciting a soft gasp. "It's alive," she said, wonder softening the fear in her voice. "Like it remembers." Sibylla nodded, the visions still echoing in her mind. Tiamat's history wasn't mere myth. It was memory, encoded in the salt and lightning that birthed Abyssos. She glanced at him, his stormy eyes reflecting the pool's glow. "What else do you carry?" she thought, the question pulsing through their bond. "Fragments," he replied, his mental voice a low thrum. "Enough to drown worlds. Or remake them." His hand found hers again, thumb stroking the pulse point at her wrist. The touch reignited the heat, a slow build that made her breath hitch. In the cathedral's sanctity, away from the Iron Fleet's pursuit, the temptation to lose herself in him grew stronger. They reached a side alcove, its walls lined with alcoves holding crystalline relics, shards of what might have been Tiamat's scales, now veined with conductive minerals. Effie knelt by one, her eyes alight behind her spectacles. "These could amplify the binding ritual. If we integrate them into your anchor, Sibylla, Abyssos might manifest longer without draining you." Hope flickered in Sibylla's chest, tempered by the vision's warnings. "And the cost?" Effie hesitated, then met her gaze. "The previous bindings. They didn't account for balance. The humans became vessels, hollowed out. But with your sensitivity, and my calibrations, we might achieve symbiosis." Maris snorted softly. "Symbiosis. Sounds like a polite way of saying merge and pray. But I've seen what you two can do. If anyone can cheat the gods, it's you." Abyssos's form flickered, amusement rippling through him. "The gods are dead, or sleeping. We are their heirs." He pulled Sibylla closer, his lips grazing her ear. "Shall we test it? Here, in her temple?" Her body responded before her mind could protest, a flush creeping up her neck. The alcove offered seclusion, the plasma dome muffling sounds. Effie and Maris busied themselves with the relics, giving tacit permission. Sibylla turned into him, her suit's filaments humming as they aligned with his plasma. "Yes," she whispered, surrendering to the pull. The anchoring deepened, intimate and raw. Abyssos's hands peeled back the suit's seals with careful precision, exposing skin to the charged air. His touch was electric, literally, sparks dancing where flesh met plasma. She moaned, the sound swallowed by the depths as he explored her, mapping her curves with currents that teased and tormented. Pleasure built in layers. The initial spark at her breasts, hardening nipples under his assault. The deeper throb as his fingers delved lower, parting her folds with a jolt that made her knees buckle. Pain threaded through it, a burn that heightened every sensation, reminding her of the cost. She clung to him, nails digging into his semi-solid form, urging him on. He entered her mind and body simultaneously, his essence flooding her core. Visions flickered again, brief flashes of Tiamat's lovers, primordial beings who coupled in the waves, birthing storms from their unions. Sibylla rode the wave, hips grinding against him, chasing the release that bound them tighter. When climax shattered her, it was revelatory. Colors unseen bloomed in her vision, the cathedral's runes igniting in sympathy. Abyssos groaned, his form solidifying further, holding her through the aftershocks. They parted slowly, breaths ragged in their helmets. Effie cleared her throat from the alcove's edge. Effective. The relics resonate stronger now. We proceed? Sibylla nodded, steadying herself. The bond felt balanced for the first time. Stronger. The Nexus chamber awaited, but now the path to the drowned cities beckoned through the archway. As they emerged, the vista unfolded. Towers of pearl and obsidian, streets paved with fossilized shells, figures frozen in eternal poses, previous anchors, their forms merged with leviathan essences, neither human nor sea, but something transcendent. A chill ran through Sibylla, not from cold, but revelation. This was their destination, the cradle of permanence. But the visions whispered of traps, of souls lost to the merge. Abyssos squeezed her hand. Together. He pulsed. She squeezed back, stepping into the unknown. The depths held no more secrets. They held their future. The first spires of the drowned cities loomed as they crossed the threshold, the plasma bridge spanning a chasm of inky water. Effie's device beeped warnings, currents unstable, fields fluctuating. But the group pressed on, drawn by the ethereal pull. In the distance, a figure stirred among the ruins, eyes glowing with ancient light. A remnant, watching. Waiting. Sibylla's heart raced. The descent had only begun. Chapter 5. The Drowned Echoes. The water pressed against Sibylla's skin like a lover's insistent hand, cool and unyielding, as the submersible's lanterns pierced the perpetual twilight of the Mediterranean depths. The drowned cities emerged from the gloom not as ruins, but as a frozen tableau of antiquity. Phoenician spires and colonnades suspended in crystalline stasis, their marble facades etched with the faint glow of bioluminescent algae. Effie's contraption, a jury-rigged sphere of reinforced glass and copper coils, hummed with the low thrum of electromagnetic fields, holding back the sea just enough for them to breathe in the plasma pockets that Abyssos had woven around them. Sibylla adjusted the brass fittings of her diving suit, her fingers trembling slightly from the residual charge of their last anchoring. Abyssos's presence lingered in her veins, a tingling echo that made her nerves sing with both ecstasy and exhaustion. He manifested beside her now, not as the crackling plasma of their hurried escapes, but in a more stable form. Humanoid, his skin a shimmering mosaic of salt water and lightning, eyes like storm-tossed oceans. This place, his voice resonated in her mind, a vibration that bypassed her ears and hummed directly in her bones. It calls to me. Echoes of bindings long dissolved. Dr. Euphemia Blackwater, ever the pragmatist, consulted her water-sealed ledger, her spectacles fogging slightly in the humid air. The text spoke of this: cities preserved by the leviathans' own fields, a sanctuary turned tomb for those who sought eternity in the deep. Her voice was steady, but Sibylla caught the flicker of unease in her eyes. Maris Deepwell, trailing behind with a lantern in hand, clutched her shawl tighter. The former courtesan had proven her mettle in the descent, her latent sensitivity allowing her to navigate the currents without succumbing to vertigo. But here, in the heart of the drowned world, even her bravado wavered. They stepped out onto the Grand Plaza, the submersible's anchor sinking into silt that hadn't stirred in millennia. The air, if one could call the charged plasma air, was thick with salt and something metallic, like blood left too long in the sun. Statues of forgotten merchants and sailors lined the avenues, their stone eyes seeming to follow the intruders. But it was the figures that moved, or rather shimmered into half-existence, that set Sibylla's heart pounding. The first drowned soul materialized from the shadows of a crumbling archway, a woman in tattered Phoenician robes, her form translucent, woven from faint electric arcs that danced like fireflies in a jar. Her eyes were hollow voids, yet they fixed on Sibylla with unnerving clarity. "Anchor!" "You seek the anchor," she whispered, her voice a chorus of bubbling water and distant thunder. The words slithered into Sibylla's mind, unbidden, carrying the weight of centuries. Abyssos tensed beside her, his form flickering as if the soul's presence disrupted his cohesion. She was bound to Thalasar, a brother fragment of mine. Their union lasted a generation before the sea reclaimed him. Sibylla swallowed, stepping forward despite the chill that crawled up her spine. "What happened? We need to know the risks. The permanence." The spectral woman tilted her head, her hair floating like tendrils of ink in water. "Permanence is a lie whispered by the deep. I gave my flesh, my fire, to hold him solid. Pleasure bound us first, ecstasies that lit the nights like auroras. But pain followed, the slow erosion of self. He grew greedy for my warmth, drawing deeper, until I was but a husk, my thoughts drowned in his endless current." She extended a hand, and where her fingers brushed Sibylla's arm, a jolt of memory flooded in. Visions of tangled limbs on silk-draped beds, bodies arching in electric bliss, only to fade into agony as the woman's veins glowed with unnatural light, her screams echoing in a chamber much like this one. Sibylla jerked back, gasping, her bioelectric field sparking involuntarily. The touch had ignited something within her, a mirror to her own nights with Abyssos. The pleasure was undeniable, a drug that coursed through her like lightning, but the undercurrent of loss, it haunted her. Effie scribbled furiously, her pencil scratching against the damp page. "Fascinating. The bindings create a feedback loop. Symbiotic at first, parasitic in the end. If we can quantify the decay rate." "Marshal your science, Doctor," Machis interjected, her voice sharp with fear masked as scorn. "These ghosts are warning us, not lecturing." But her eyes darted to the shadows where more figures began to emerge. Men and women, lovers entwined in eternal spectral embrace, their forms merging and separating in silent torment. One pair caught Sibylla's eye, a burly sailor and a lithe priestess, their essences intertwined like vines. The man reached for the woman, his hand passing through her translucent form, eliciting a wail that vibrated the water around them. "She offered eternity," he moaned, "but stole my sea soul. I wander these halls, forever half dissolved, yearning for the waves that birthed me." Abyssos's gaze lingered on them, his plasma form pulsing with a rhythm that matched Sibylla's quickening pulse. "I feel it," he admitted, his voice a low rumble in her chest. "The temptation, to be flesh always, to touch without the veil of current. With you, Sibylla, it could be real." She turned to him, her heart clenching. In the dim light, his features sharpened, high cheekbones sculpted from ionized water, lips that promised storms. The memory of their last union replayed unbidden. Her body arched against the bulkhead of the ship, his electricity coiling through her like a serpent, igniting every nerve until she shattered, only to wake with phantom burns etching her skin. It was love, or madness, or both, but permanence. The drowned souls painted a picture of oblivion, not bliss. As they pressed deeper into the city, The streets narrowed into labyrinthine alleys, where the walls wept luminous tears. More souls accosted them, whispers of failed rituals, echoes of screams during the final merge. One ancient crone, her form a web of crackling veins, grasped Maris's wrist. "The anchor demands all," she hissed. "Your sisters before you, conductors like you, fed the deep their marrow. Flee, or become the next echo." Maris paled, yanking free, but the touch left her trembling, sparks dancing along her arms. "Sib, this place. It's alive. It wants us." Effie nodded grimly, adjusting a device on her belt that measured the ambient fields. "The stasis is maintained by residual leviathan energy. These souls are trapped in the feedback, unable to ascend or descend." Sibylla felt Abyssos' urgency building, his form brushing against hers, sending involuntary shivers through her. "We must find the central chamber," he urged. There, the first binding occurred. Answers lie in its currents. The path led them to a vast amphitheater, its tiers carved from coral-encrusted stone, the stage dominated by a monolithic altar veined with quartz that pulsed like a heartbeat. The air here was thicker, charged with the residue of ancient power. As they approached, the drowned souls converged, forming a spectral audience that murmured in forgotten tongues. At the altar's base, a nexus of light swirled, a holographic memory projected by the lingering fields. It depicted a ritual, a woman much like Sibylla, her body oiled and adorned with conductive sigils, lying upon the stone as her leviathan lover descended in a maelstrom of sparks. Their union was raw, primal, bodies slamming together in a frenzy of need, her cries mingling with the crackle of thunder. Pleasure built to a crescendo, her biofield enveloping him completely, solidifying his form inch by inch. But as permanence took hold, horror unfolded. Her eyes widened in terror, veins bulging with overload, her form convulsing as the Leviathan's essence flooded her beyond capacity, dissolving her from within. Sibylla watched, transfixed, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The eroticism of the scene clashed with its tragedy, mirroring her own fears. Abyssos' hand found hers, his touch igniting a familiar heat low in her belly. "See how she surrendered," he whispered, his voice laced with hunger. "We could be that. Whole. Eternal." But Sibylla pulled away, the vision's end replaying in her mind. The woman's body arching one final time, then slumping, her lover's now permanent form cradling a lifeless shell. "At what cost?" she demanded, her voice breaking. Internally, conflict raged, a war between the addictive pull of their bond and the dread of becoming another echo. She loved him, this electric storm in her blood. But love was not enough if it meant erasure. Maris, sensing the tension, stepped between them. "Enough ghosts. We came for knowledge, not to join them." She glanced at Effie, who was scanning the altar with her instruments. "Anything useful, Doctor? Or is this just a fancy graveyard?" Effie straightened, her face illuminated by the device's glow. "The risks are clear. Neural overload, identity dissolution. But there's a counter-ritual encoded here. A way to balance the merge, to anchor without consuming. It requires multiple conductors, a network to distribute the load." Her eyes met Sibylla's. "You, Maris, perhaps others. A covenant, not a solitary binding." Abyssos' form dimmed slightly, temptation warring with caution. "It tempts me still. To hold you forever without the fade." He reached for Sibylla again, gentler this time, his fingers tracing her jaw. The contact sparked a wave of desire, her body responding despite her turmoil. Nipples tightening under the damp fabric, an ache building between her thighs. She leaned into him, conflicted, her lips brushing his in a kiss that tasted of salt and ozone. "Not here," she murmured, though her body betrayed her words, pressing closer. The drowned souls watched, their murmurs rising like a dirge. But the moment shattered as a new presence intruded. A deeper hum, not from the souls, but from the city itself. The altar's quartz veins flared, projecting not memory but warning, shadows of rival leviathans stirring in the depths drawn by their intrusion. And beyond, the faint silhouette of iron ships on the horizon above, the iron fleet closing in. Sibylla broke the kiss, resolve hardening amid the melancholy. We have our answers, but time slips away. Permanence can wait. The sea won't. Her internal conflict deepened, a chasm widening in her soul. But for now, survival bound them tighter than any ritual. As they retreated toward the submersible, the drowned echoes followed, their pleas fading into the current. The drowned cities had revealed its secrets, but at the cost of planting seeds of doubt that would bloom in the storms to come. The plaza blurred as they hurried, the souls' forms dissolving like mist. Sibylla's mind raced, replaying the visions, the touches, the temptations. Abyssos walked beside her, silent now, his temptation a palpable weight. Maris and Effie flanked them, lanterns casting long shadows that danced with the spectres. In a secluded alcove away from the main paths, Sibylla paused, the weight of it all pressing down. "Abyssos," she said softly, turning to him. The others gave them space, Effie murmuring something about calibrating the exit. He materialized fully, pulling her into the shadows, his body solid against hers. "The echoes speak truth," he admitted, his hands roaming her back, igniting sparks. "But so does my desire." His lips claimed hers, urgent, the kiss deepening into something feral. She gasped as his electricity coursed through her, not the full anchoring, but enough to tease, to torment. Her hands fisted in his plasma-woven shirt, pulling him closer. The alcove's walls, etched with ancient pleas, seemed to close in, amplifying the intimacy. "We can't," she whispered, even as her legs parted instinctively, his thigh pressing between them. Pleasure spiked, sharp and sweet, her core clenching with need. "We can," he growled, nipping at her neck, his touch sending jolts straight to her center. She arched, moaning softly, the melancholy of the city forgotten in the heat. His fingers deftly unlaced her suit, exposing skin to the charged air, his mouth following, tongue tracing paths that made her writhe. It was reckless, this stolen moment amid ghosts, but the temptation mirrored his own. She surrendered partially, guiding his hand lower, gasping as he stroked her, electricity building in waves that crested toward release. "Abyssos!" Her climax hit like a storm surge, body shuddering, but as it faded, reality crashed back. The risks, the souls, her fracturing self. He held her through the aftershocks, his form flickering with restraint. "Not permanence," he promised, voice rough. "Not yet." But as they rejoined the others, Sibylla's conflict burned brighter. The drowned echoes lingered in her mind, a haunting reminder that love in the deep came at a price. The submersible's hatch sealed behind them with a hiss, the drowned cities receding into twilight. Yet the echoes followed, whispering of choices yet to be made. Chapter 6. Iron Cage. The drowned cities slumbered in eternal twilight, their Phoenician spires cloaked in a veil of bioluminescent algae that pulsed like the veins of a colossal breathing beast. Sibylla Thorne moved through the labyrinthine streets with the caution of a cartographer charting unyielding chaos, her lantern's glow cutting fragile paths through the murk. Beside her, Abyssos flickered in his semi-corporeal form, a humanoid silhouette of crackling plasma tethered to her bioelectric field, his presence humming in her nerves like a storm trapped in her bloodstream. Maris Deepwell trailed close, her breaths shallow and ragged from the weight of the ancient air. The former prostitute's eyes, sharp as barnacles on a hull, darted to every shadow. "These ruins, they whisper," she murmured, her voice echoing off coral-encrusted walls. "Like lovers, long drowned, begging for release." Sibylla nodded, suppressing the tremor in her hand. The spectral remnants from the previous day's explorations still haunted her. the translucent figures of past anchors, their forms warped by failed bindings, pleading in silent currents. Each vision had deepened the chasm in her soul, the addiction to Abyssos's essence gnawing at her edges. She could feel him now, coiling through her veins, a lover's touch that bordered on possession. "We press on," Sibylla said, her voice steady despite the electric ache in her chest. "The central archive lies ahead. Effie said it holds the key to permanence." Dr. Effie Blackwater had remained behind in a safer alcove, tinkering with her devices to amplify their signals, but her absence weighed heavy. Abyssos's form shimmered, his voice resonating not in air but in the marrow of her bones, a low thunder of electromagnetic pulses. The waters stir Sibylla. Something iron-hearted approaches. She froze, the warning igniting her senses. The drowned cities were a sanctuary of stasis, preserved by the electromagnetic fields that Abyssos revered as kin. But now, a discordant hum invaded the harmony, a mechanical growl rising from the depths. The ambush erupted without mercy. From the shadowed fissures of the seafloor, ironclad submersibles breached the ruins like predatory sharks, their hulls etched with the Admiralty's insignia. Harpoons tipped with conductive coils lanced through the water, trailing wires that sparked with contained fury. The Iron Fleet had found them. "Sibylla!" Maris cried, shoving her aside as a net of electrified mesh descended. The trap snapped shut around Maris, its Faraday weave pulsing to suppress bioelectric signatures. She thrashed, her latent sensitivity flaring in futile bursts, but the cage held, dragging her toward the gaping maw of the lead submersible. Abyssos surged forward, his plasma form expanding into a tempest of lightning veins. "No!" His pulse roared through Sibylla, forcing her to anchor him deeper, her body arching as his power flooded her. Pain and ecstasy intertwined, her nerves alight as she channeled him into a bolt that shattered the nearest harpoon line. But more came. Divers in weighted suits, armed with gauntlets that discharged suppression fields. Admiral Cornelius Flint emerged from the submersible's hatch, his figure imposing even in the pressurized depths. His prosthetic arm, a marvel of brass and insulated wire, gleamed under the algae's glow. Scars from past electrical burns twisted his face into a mask of vengeful determination. "Miss Thorne!" His voice boomed through a helmet communicator, distorted but commanding. "Your meddling ends here. The Crown claims the leviathans, and you." Sibylla's heart pounded, fury igniting her core. She drew her concealed dagger, its blade etched with conductive runes Effie had gifted her. "You'll drown in your own ambition, Admiral." With Abyssos's essence surging, she dove into the fray, her movements amplified by the bond. She slashed at a diver's tether, sending him spinning into the ruins. But the fleet was relentless. Electromagnetic traps bloomed like jellyfish blooms, fields that warped the water's conductivity, sapping Abyssos's strength. He flickered, his form destabilizing, pulling at Sibylla's field until she gasped, knees buckling in the silt. Maris's cage vanished into the submersible, the hatch sealing with a hydraulic hiss. "Retreat!" Abyssos urged, his pulse frantic. "They have her. We cannot lose you too." Sibylla resisted, firing a makeshift flare from her belt, a burst of alchemical powder that illuminated the Admiral's sneer. But the traps closed in, their hum drowning his voice. She fled into the twisting alleys of the drowned cities, Abyssos's light her only guide, the weight of failure crushing her. They regrouped in a collapsed atrium, its dome cracked to reveal shafts of filtered abyssal light. Effie awaited, her face pale beneath her diving helmet. "The Iron Fleet." "How?" she whispered, removing the mask to reveal sweat-slicked features. "Flint," Sibylla spat, pacing the uneven floor. Her body thrummed with residual charge, Abyssos hovering close, his form subdued. "He must have tracked our signals." "Maris." She's sensitive enough to draw them like a beacon. Abyssos materialized partially, his plasma coalescing into a hand that brushed her arm. a touch that sent sparks dancing across her skin. We will free her. But the cages, they are forged to bind my kind. Effie's eyes narrowed, consulting a sodden map. The submersibles dock at the old harbour basin. Faraday cages line the holds, iron lattices infused with lodestone to nullify fields. But if we sabotage the power cores... Sibylla's mind raced, the plan forming amid the tension. I go in. Anchor you fully, Abyssos. We overload the system from within. Her voice held a heroic resolve, but inwardly dread coiled. Each full anchoring eroded her humanity, the pleasure a siren's call to dissolution. As night deepened, or what passed for it in the sunless depths, Sibylla prepared. She stripped to her undergarments, the chill water kissing her skin like a lover's breath. Effie applied conductive salves to her scars, murmuring incantations of protection. Abyssos watched, his essence pulsing with hunger. It will hurt, he warned, his voice a caress in her mind. But the union, it will be profound. She met his gaze, the plasma eyes holding ancient seas. Then let's drown together. The anchoring began in the atrium's seclusion, a ritual as intimate as it was perilous. Sibylla reclined on a slab of weathered marble, her body arching as Abyssos flowed into her. His electricity coursed through her biofield, igniting every nerve ending in a blaze of sensation. Pleasure built like a tidal wave. Her breaths came in gasps, hips bucking involuntarily as his essence filled her, stretching her boundaries. Abyssos, she moaned, fingers clawing the stone. The bond deepened, pain lacing the ecstasy as her cells conducted his power. He manifested above her, a spectral form pressing close, his plasma tendrils exploring her curves with electric kisses that made her cry out. It was more than survival. It was surrender, their bodies, flesh and lightning, merging in a dance of dominance and devotion. Orgasm shattered her, waves of current rippling through, stabilizing his form into solid plasma. He solidified enough to hold her, their union sealing with a final shuddering pulse. Exhausted but empowered, Sibylla rose. Abyssos now a crackling armor around her, ready for war. They approached the harbour basin under cover of silt storms Effie conjured with her devices. The Iron Fleet's submersibles loomed like behemoths, their lights piercing the gloom. Guards patrolled the gangways, but Sibylla slipped through, her enhanced senses guiding her. Inside the lead vessel, the air was thick with ozone and salt. Maris hung in a suspended cage, her body limp, eyes fluttering against the suppression. Nearby, smaller Faraday enclosures hummed, containing writhing entities, fragments of leviathans captured from the seas, their forms twisting in futile rage. Flint stood before a console, his prosthetic whirring as he adjusted dials. "The girl will yield her secrets," he growled to an aide. "And Thorn. She'll come for her." Sibylla struck from the shadows, Abyssos unleashing a targeted surge that felled 2 guards. Alarms blared, but she was a tempest now, darting between crates, sabotaging conduits with her dagger. Sparks flew as she reached the power core, a pulsating heart of coils and crystals. "Intruder!" Flint bellowed, his arm extending into a conductive whip that lashed toward her. Abyssos intercepted, their clash a symphony of crackles and booms. Sibylla pressed on, prying open a panel to expose the core's wiring. With a prayer to the depths, she channeled Abyssos's overload, her hand glowing as current poured in, the machine groaning in protest. The Faraday cages flickered, their fields collapsing. Maris slumped free, gasping as Sibylla caught her. The entities burst forth, plasma forms expanding in vengeful fury, slamming into the bulkheads. Flint roared, charging with his whip, but the liberated leviathans swarmed him, their electricity arcing across his suit. He staggered, the Admiral's empire crumbling in the chaos. "Sibylla!" Maris rasped, clinging to her. You saved me." "Not yet," Sibylla replied, hauling her toward the exit as the submersible shuddered. Abyssos covered their retreat, his power waning but heroic. They burst into the open water, Effie waiting with an escape pod. As they fled into the ruins, the Iron Fleet's lights dimmed behind, but Flint's voice echoed in the currents. A promise of pursuit. Sibylla held Maris close, Abyssos's pulse steady in her veins. The cage was broken, but the war raged on, their bond the unyielding anchor in the storm. Yet in the quiet aftermath, as they huddled in a new hiding place, Sibylla felt the toll. Her skin tingled with residual charge, her thoughts fragmented by the anchoring's afterglow. Abyssos withdrew slightly, his form flickering with concern. "You pushed too far, my anchor." She smiled weakly, tracing the scars on her arm. "For you. For all of us. It's worth the drown." But deep in the drowned cities, the entities they freed whispered thanks. And warnings. Tiamat stirred, her ancient grudge awakening to the ripples of their defiance. Chapter 7. Fractured Bonds. The hidden chamber in the drowned cities was a forgotten sanctum, carved from the bones of an ancient Phoenician temple and sealed by centuries of silt and pressure. Bioluminescent fungi clung to the walls like glowing scars, casting an ethereal blue haze that danced across the uneven stone floor. Water seeped in lazy rivulets from cracks overhead, pooling in shallow basins that reflected the chamber's dim light like shattered mirrors. Sibylla Thorne knelt beside Maris Deepwell, who lay sprawled on a makeshift pallet of woven kelp and salvaged fabrics, her body trembling from the ordeal of the Faraday cage. The suppression fields had leached the life from her, leaving her skin pallid and her breaths shallow, as if the sea itself had tried to claim her soul. Abyssos hovered nearby, his form a swirling vortex of plasma that had stabilized into something almost tangible, a humanoid silhouette with edges that blurred into electric arcs. The rescue had pushed him to his limits, and now, in the quiet aftermath, he pulsed with a subdued intensity, his essence echoing in Sibylla's veins like a lingering heartbeat. She could feel him there, always, a constant thrum that both soothed and tormented her. The addiction had rooted deeper since the anchoring in the submersible. Each surge of his power left her craving more, her body aching for the electric flood that blurred the line between pleasure and oblivion. "Maris," Sibylla whispered, brushing damp hair from the woman's forehead. Maris's eyes fluttered open, glazed with pain and exhaustion. "Hold on. We're going to fix this." Maris managed a weak smile, her voice a rasp like gravel underfoot. You came for me, like a storm in the depths." Her hand clutched Sibylla's, fingers cold and clammy. But beneath the gratitude lay fear. The cage hadn't just drained her. It had awakened something latent, a sensitivity to the currents that now twisted inside her like barbed wire. Abyssos's voice resonated in Sibylla's mind, a low vibration that sent shivers cascading down her spine. "She fades, my anchor. The iron poisoned her field. I can mend it, but it will require you." Sibylla nodded, though dread coiled in her gut. Healing through their bond meant channeling Abyssos's essence through her body into Maris, a ritual of conduction that demanded intimacy, vulnerability. Her addiction whispered temptations, the rush, the ecstasy, the way his lightning would ignite her from within. She glanced at Abyssos, his plasma eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. He was changing, growing more defined, his form hinting at musculature and features that mimicked humanity. The more they anchored, the more he yearned for flesh. "Effie," Sibylla called softly. The doctor was absent, scouting the perimeter with her devices to ensure the Iron Fleet hadn't followed. It was just the three of them in this womb-like chamber, the weight of isolation pressing in. Maris stirred. What do we do?" Sibylla swallowed, her throat dry despite the humid air. "A ritual. Abyssos's power can heal you, but I have to bridge it. Through touch. Through us." She didn't elaborate, the words felt too raw, too exposing. But Maris, with her history in the shadowed alleys of Whitby, understood. Her eyes widened, a flicker of something between apprehension and curiosity. "Will it hurt?" Maris asked, her voice trembling. "For me, maybe," Sibylla admitted, tracing a finger along Maris's arm, feeling the erratic flutter of her bioelectric field. "But it'll save you." Abyssos approached, his form condensing until he could almost be touched, a silhouette of crackling energy that warmed the air around him. "Lie still, sensitive one. Let the current flow." They arranged Maris on the pallet, her limbs splayed in a star of supplication. Sibylla positioned herself at her side, shedding her sodden outer layers until she wore only a thin shift that clung to her curves like a second skin. The chamber's chill nipped at her exposed flesh, raising goosebumps that Abyssos's proximity soon chased away with waves of heat. She took Maris's hands in hers, interlacing their fingers, and closed her eyes, reaching for the bond. "Open to me," Abyssos urged, his essence coiling around her like invisible tendrils. Sibylla exhaled, surrendering to the pull. His electricity seeped into her pores, a slow burn that started at her fingertips and radiated inward. It was gentle at first, a teasing current that made her nipples harden against the fabric of her shift, her breath hitching as it pooled in her core. Maris gasped, her body arching slightly as the first sparks jumped from Sibylla's hands. "It's warm, like sunlight underwater." Sibylla concentrated, guiding the flow. But control slipped as the addiction surged, demanding more. She pressed closer, her thigh brushing Maris's hip, the contact amplifying the conduction. Abyssos deepened the link, his plasma form manifesting hands that rested on Sibylla's shoulders, ghostly at first, then solidifying into a grip that kneaded her muscles with electric pulses. The ritual intensified. Sibylla's skin flushed, sweat beading on her brow as Abyssos's power flooded her. It was intoxicating, a lover's caress turned voracious. She moaned softly, her free hand trailing down her own body, fingers slipping beneath the hem of her shift to touch the slick heat building between her legs. The addiction clawed at her, urging her to lose herself in the sensation, to let Abyssos consume her entirely. "That's it," Maris murmured, her voice gaining strength as color returned to her cheeks. The current knit her torn field, mending the frayed edges where the cage had ravaged her. But the intimacy of it stirred something in Maris too. Her hips shifted, a soft whimper escaping her lips as the electricity danced across her nerves, awakening dormant desires. Abyssos's form grew more corporeal, his plasma coalescing into a body that pressed against Sibylla from behind. She felt him. Solid, warm, almost flesh, his chest to her back, his arousal manifesting as a hard ridge against her ass. "You crave this," he whispered in her mind, his voice husky with shared hunger. "Let me fill you. Let it heal her through our union." Sibylla's resolve cracked. She released Maris's hands momentarily, hiking up her shift to bare her lower body. The air kissed her exposed skin, cool against the feverish heat. Abyssos's tendrils explored her, one coiling around her thigh to part her legs, another teasing her entrance with feather-light shocks that made her gasp. She rocked back against him, desperate for friction, her fingers circling her clit in frantic rhythm. Maris watched, her healing body responding with a flush of her own. "Sibylla. It's beautiful. Dangerous, but—" The words spurred Sibylla on. Abyssos thrust into her then, not fully corporeal, but enough to send waves of electric ecstasy rippling through her core. She cried out, her body clenching around the intrusion of pure energy, pleasure bordering on pain as it stretched her, filled her to bursting. Each pulse healed Maris a fraction more, the current arcing from Sibylla's joined hands to infuse the woman with vitality. But it was perverting this ritual, Sibylla's addiction twisting the necessity into indulgence. She rode the waves, hips grinding against Abyssos's manifesting form, her moans echoing off the chamber walls. Maris's touches grew bolder, her healed hands roaming Sibylla's arms, then lower, cupping a breast through the shift, thumb brushing the peaked nipple. The triad of sensation overwhelmed Sibylla. Abyssos's relentless thrusts, Maris's tentative caresses, her own spiraling need. Climax built like a maelstrom, crashing over her in a torrent of light and sound. Sibylla screamed, her body convulsing as Abyssos's essence peaked within her, flooding her with a surge that bordered on annihilation. The excess spilled out, channeling into Maris, who arched and shuddered in shared release, her field restored in a blaze of renewal. They collapsed in a tangle, breaths ragged, bodies slick with sweat and residual charge. Maris sat up slowly, flexing her fingers, color blooming in her face. "I'm whole again. Thank you." Her eyes lingered on Sibylla, a mix of awe and lingering heat. But Sibylla barely heard. The addiction gnawed fiercer now, her body trembling with aftershocks that demanded more. She pulled away from Abyssos, his form withdrawing with a reluctant hum. He solidified further, features sharpening, high cheekbones, full lips, eyes like storm-tossed seas. He looked almost human, vulnerable in his desire. "Sibylla," he said aloud for the first time, his voice a deep timbre that vibrated the air. Not just in her mind, real, resonant. Maris startled, staring at him. "Abyssos, you spoke." He ignored her, focusing on Sibylla. "The ritual, it binds us closer. I feel it, the pull toward flesh. Permanence." His hand reached for hers, solid fingers intertwining with hers, warm and alive. Sibylla yanked away, scrambling to her feet, her shift falling back into place. The high faded into a crash, leaving her raw and exposed. "No, not yet. We can't." Her voice cracked, the addiction warring with fear. Each anchoring made him more human. But at what cost? The drowned souls from earlier chapters haunted her. The anchors who had lost themselves, bodies hollowed by the bond. Abyssos stood, his form holding shape without effort now. Naked plasma sculpted into a warrior's physique, arousal still evident in the taut lines of his body. "Why fight it? You crave me as I crave form. The permanence would end this torment, stable, together, forever." Maris rose unsteadily, sensing the storm brewing. "Sibylla, he's right. After what I've seen, the power you wield, imagine it without the pain." "Pain?" Sibylla whirled on her, eyes flashing. "You felt a taste of it healing you, but this—" She gestured to Abyssos, who stepped closer, his scent like ozone and salt filling her senses. "This devours me. Every time I lose a piece. The addiction. It's not just pleasure. It's erasure." Abyssos's expression darkened, human emotions etching his features, hurt, frustration. "I am not your enemy. I am your other half. The archives speak of it, the eternal binding where anchor and leviathan become one. No more flickering. No more withdrawal." He reached for her again, his touch igniting sparks on her skin. She slapped his hand away, the contact sending a jolt through her that nearly buckled her knees. "And what of me? Do I become your vessel hollowed out like those specters? Or worse, do I drown in you?" Tears stung her eyes, the emotional turbulence churning like the sea above. Maris intervened, placing a hand on Sibylla's shoulder. "Hey, easy. We're all frayed. But pushing him away, it weakens us all." Abyssos's form flickered, the rejection rippling through him. "You fear what you desire most. The permanence is our salvation, Sibylla. Against Flint, against the rivals, against her." His voice dropped, gaze distant. "Her?" Sibylla echoed, wiping her face. "Tiamat," he murmured. "I feel her stirring. The ritual. It echoed through the currents. She senses our union, her ancient rage bubbling up from the trench. Whispers in the water. Waves of shadow calling the leviathans home." The chamber seemed to grow colder, the bioluminescent fungi dimming as if in response. Sibylla shivered, the argument fracturing under the weight of greater threat. Distant rumbles echoed through the stone, like the groan of tectonic plates shifting, or something vaster awakening. Maris paled. "The sea, Mother? Already?" Abyssos nodded, his human-like face etched with worry. "Our bond draws her. Permanence would arm us against it." Sibylla sank to the floor, head in hands. The addiction pulsed, a siren's song tempting her to yield. But the strain with Abyssos hung heavy, their relationship teetering on the abyss. "We need time," she whispered, "to find another way." He knelt before her, solid hand cupping her chin, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Time is the sea's illusion. The drown comes for us all." His thumb brushed her lip, electric promise lingering. She leaned into the touch despite herself, the fractured bond pulling taut once more. But in the depths, Tiamat's hints stirred, tentacles of shadow brushing the edges of their sanctuary, a prelude to the cataclysm. Effie's voice called from the entrance tunnel, breaking the tension. "All clear, for now. But the currents are restless." As the doctor entered, the group exchanged glances, the argument unresolved, the healing a double-edged salve. Sibylla's addiction simmered, Abyssos's humanity bloomed, and the sea whispered of storms yet to break. Yet in the quiet that followed, Sibylla felt the pull deepen, her body yearning even as her heart rebelled. The ritual had mended Maris, but it had cracked something irrevocable between her and Abyssos, a fracture that might yet shatter them all. Chapter 8. Atlas Unraveled. The hidden chamber in the drowned cities pulsed with an unnatural luminescence, the walls etched with Phoenician glyphs that seemed to writhe like living veins under the faint glow of Effie's portable galvanic lamp. Sibylla Thorne slumped against a crumbling pillar, her body still thrumming from the healing ritual that had saved Maris but nearly unraveled her own fragile humanity. Sweat beaded on her forehead, mixing with the salt of the stagnant air, and she could feel the ghost of Abyssos's electricity lingering in her nerves, a sweet ache that bordered on ecstasy and agony. Abyssos hovered nearby, his form a crackling silhouette of plasma, tethered to her bioelectric field like a storm leashed to a lightning rod. He had grown more solid since their last anchoring, his features sharper, almost human, with eyes like molten silver. But the argument from moments ago hung between them like charged ozone. "Permanence will bind me," he had hissed in her mind, his voice a vibration that rattled her bones. "But without it, I fade." Dr. Euphemia Blackwater knelt beside a scattered pile of artifacts, her spectacles perched on the tip of her nose as she sifted through brittle parchments and corroded bronze tablets. Maris Deepwell, pale but recovering, leaned against the opposite wall, her fingers tracing the scars on her arms where the Iron Fleet's traps had bitten deep. "This place is a graveyard of ambitions," Effie murmured, her voice echoing softly. "Every soul who bound a leviathan before us left something behind, warnings mostly. But perhaps a map." Sibylla pushed herself upright, ignoring the tremor in her limbs. The addiction clawed at her. She craved the surge of him inside her, the way his essence flooded her veins like liquid fire. But now was not the time. "Show me," she said, her voice hoarse. Effie held up a weathered tome, its cover embossed with a coiling serpent that mirrored the leviathan's forms. "The Atlas of the Abyss," she breathed. "Legends spoke of it in my grandfather's journals. A cartographer's folly from the time of the ancients, charting not just seas, but the veins of the world below." The pages crackled as she opened it, revealing illustrations of submerged continents and swirling currents that defied modern hydrography. Sibylla's cartographer's eye drank it in, recognizing patterns that echoed the phantom maps she had drawn in her London workshop. As they pored over the atlas together, Abyssos drew closer, his plasma form flickering with curiosity. His hand, a tendril of light, brushed the page, and a spark leaped, illuminating hidden inks that bloomed like blood in water. Symbols shifted, revealing a jagged scar in the Earth's crust, far beyond the Mediterranean's cradle. Tiamat's trench, the womb of the First Mother, where the primordial sea goddess slumbered. "There," Abyssos intoned, his voice a deep hum that resonated in Sibylla's chest. "The anchor. The place where I can become whole." Hope flickered in Sibylla's heart, fragile as a bioluminescent bloom. If they reached the trench, Abyssos could manifest permanently, free from her body's toll. But the cost, merging with Tiamat's awakening essence, loomed like a shadow. Effie traced the route with a gloved finger. "It's a suicide path through the abyssal plains. Currents that devour ships, leviathans guarding the gates. But it's our only chance." Maris stirred. "Then we move. Before Flint—" A distant rumble cut her off, vibrating through the stone like the growl of an awakening beast. The air thickened with the tang of ozone and machine oil. Effie's face paled. "The Iron Fleet. They've breached the outer ruins." Sibylla's blood ran cold. Admiral Cornelius Flint had hunted them across oceans, his Faraday-caged armada a testament to Victorian hubris. She could almost hear his voice, that gravelly command laced with the bitterness of his lost limb. The girl and her storm beast will power the Empire's greatest weapon. They had evaded him thus far, but the drowned city's electromagnetic stasis was failing, its ancient protections crumbling under the onslaught of his electric divisions. "We take the Atlas and run," Sibylla snapped, snatching the tome and tucking it into her satchel. Abyssos's form surged protectively around her, sparks dancing across her skin like eager lovers' touches. The contact sent a shiver through her, desire warring with dread. She needed him anchored fully to face what was coming, but the ritual would leave her exposed, vulnerable. They burst from the chamber into a labyrinth of flooded corridors, the water lapping at their ankles like greedy tongues. Effie led the way, her galvanometer humming warnings of approaching fields. Maris clutched a makeshift harpoon, her eyes fierce despite her weakness. The ruins pressed in, colossal statues of forgotten sea gods staring down with hollow eyes, their stone bodies draped in phosphorescent algae that cast eerie shadows. The first clash came in a vast atrium, where collapsed columns formed a jagged arena. Isaiah Coffin emerged from the gloom, no longer the salvager captain they had skirmished with at sea, but a vessel twisted by possession. His eyes glowed with an alien teal, veins bulging like charged wires beneath his salt-crusted skin. The rival leviathan within him, a splinter of chaotic current, had claimed him fully since their last encounter, turning the man into a puppet of writhing electricity. "Coffin!" Sibylla shouted, skidding to a halt. "Fight it! You're not its thrall!" He laughed, a sound like cracking ice, arcs of energy leaping from his fingertips. "Thrall! I'm exalted, cartographer. This power will drown your precious empire before Flint can chain it." He lunged, the air ionizing around him, and Abyssos met him mid-stride, their forms colliding in a blaze of plasma and lightning. The impact shook the chamber, sending debris raining down. Sibylla felt Abyssos's fury through their bond, a jealous rage possessive and primal. He was losing ground, the rival's current more feral, unbound by human anchor. Effie fired her arc pistol, bolts sizzling against Coffin's shielding aura, while Maris hurled her harpoon, grazing his shoulder and drawing a hiss of steam. But Coffin pressed on, his hands clawing toward Sibylla. "Your body calls to us all, witch! Give it to the sea!" Panic surged, but so did need. Sibylla dropped to her knees amid the chaos, the atlas spilling open beside her. "Abyssos!" she cried, her voice breaking. "Anchor to me! Now!" He broke from the fray, his essence pouring into her like a torrent. The ritual began unbidden, desperate. She tore at her corset, exposing sweat-slicked skin to the humid air, her breasts heaving with ragged breaths. Abyssos's electricity flooded her, coiling around her nipples like invisible tongues, pinching and teasing until she gasped. Pleasure pain lanced through her core, her thighs clenching as his power delved deeper, seeking the bioelectric nexus in her womb. Around them, the battle raged. Coffin roared, blasting Effie back with a shockwave that singed her skirts. Maris dodged tendrils of energy, countering with a coil of stolen copper wire that grounded some of the assault. But Sibylla was lost to the anchoring, her world narrowing to the electric ecstasy building within. Abyssos's form solidified against her, his plasma hands gripping her hips, pulling her onto him, or the suggestion of him, a throbbing column of charged desire that stretched her limits. She arched, crying out as he thrust in pulses of current, each one sinking their heartbeats, fusing their essences. It was more than sex. It was communion, his vast oceanic mind spilling memories into hers, visions of Tiamat's dismemberment, the birth of leviathans from her blood. The spice of it burned, her climax ripping through her like a solar flare, neurons firing in supernova bursts. Abyssos groaned in her mind, his humanity deepening with every wave, but so did the risk. She felt herself dissolving, edges blurring into his storm. Empowered, Abyssos turned from her, fully manifested now. A towering figure of crackling muscle and luminous veins, eyes blazing. He seized Coffin by the throat, their energies clashing in a maelstrom that lit the atrium like a false dawn. "You are a fragment," Abyssos snarled, his voice thunderous. "I am the Covenant." With a surge, he unraveled the rival leviathan, threads of teal light unraveling into the water, leaving Coffin a convulsing husk. The man collapsed, eyes dimming to mortal brown. "Mercy," he whispered before the life ebbed from him. No time for pity. Distant explosions echoed, Flint's forces breaching the inner sanctums. "The trench!" Effie yelled, scrambling up, her arms scorched but functional. Sibylla rose on trembling legs, Abyssos's arm around her waist, his touch still sparking aftershocks of pleasure. They fled through narrowing passages, the atlas clutched in her hand like a talisman. The drowned cities wailed around them, spectral voices of past bindings urging them onward, or warning them back. Admiral Flint's voice boomed from amplifying horns distorted by the water. "Surrender the beast, Miss Thorne. The Crown offers clemency for your service." She laughed bitterly, the sound echoing off the walls. Service. As if she were a battery to be wired into his war machines. Abyssos's grip tightened, possessive, and she leaned into it, the pain in her body a reminder of their fragile alliance. They emerged into an underwater cavern, the path to the surface, and beyond to the abyssal route, marked by a glowing archway of coral and current. Maris sealed the entrance behind them with a charge from Effie's device, buying precious minutes. As they swam upward, towed by Abyssos's electric propulsion, Sibylla unfolded the atlas in her mind's eye. Tiamat's trench awaited, a maw in the ocean floor where gods slept and lovers might perish. But in Abyssos's embrace, with the taste of their union still on her lips, salty, electric, alive, she felt the pull of destiny. The escape was desperate, the confrontation climactic, but the true unraveling had just begun. The water darkened as they descended toward the open sea, Flint's lights piercing the gloom like predatory eyes. The group pressed on, hearts pounding in unison with the ocean's roar, toward the heart of the abyss. But in the shadows, something stirred. A deeper current, ancient and vast. Tiamat's whisper, perhaps, calling her children home. Chapter 9. Whispers from the Abyss. The sea released them with a reluctant sigh, the water parting like a lover's embrace finally broken. Sibylla Thorne broke the surface first, her gasp ragged against the salt-laced air of the Mediterranean. The sun hung low on the horizon, a bruised orb bleeding orange into the waves, casting long shadows across the undulating expanse. She clung to the makeshift raft, cobbled together from splintered Phoenician timber and Effie's salvaged copper wiring, that bobbed precariously beneath them. Her body ached, every muscle protesting the ascent from the drowned cities, but it was the lingering hum in her veins that truly exhausted her. Abyssos's essence still flickered within, a restless current seeking permanence. She turned, water streaming from her sodden hair, to see him emerge beside her. Abyssos, or what passed for him in this fleeting corporeal state, rose from the depths like a spectre forged of storm. His form was plasma incarnate, skin crackling with azure veins of electricity, eyes glowing with the cold fire of distant lightning. He had anchored to her during their escape, drawing on her bioelectric field to manifest, but now, on the open sea, he was untethered, his shape wavering at the edges, as if the ocean itself yearned to reclaim him. "Sib," his voice thrummed through her bones, not in words, but in pulses that vibrated her marrow. "The surface. It binds me less than the depths. I feel exposed." She reached out, her fingers brushing his arm. Where flesh should have been warm, there was only a tingling charge, like touching the heart of a galvanic battery. "We're safe for now. Flint's fleet is scattered and Coffin's ship sank with him. We've bought time." But even as she spoke, doubt gnawed at her. Time for what? The Atlas's revelations burned in her mind, the map to Tiamat's trench, the sleeping heart of the primordial sea. And the whispers that had followed them up, faint echoes from the abyss. The raft creaked as Abyssos settled beside her, his weight sending ripples outward. The Mediterranean stretched endless around them, a vast indigo canvas dotted with the sails of distant merchant vessels, oblivious to the leviathans stirring below. No land in sight. Effie and Maris had taken the submersible ahead to rendezvous at a hidden cove near Crete. For now, it was just them, adrift in the gathering dusk. Sibylla shivered, not from cold, but from the residue of their last anchoring. In the hidden chamber of the drowned cities, she had surrendered to him again, her body the conduit for his form. The memory flooded her, the way his electric touch had arced across her skin, igniting nerves she hadn't known existed. Pleasure laced with pain, a storm that built and broke within her, conducting his essence into something almost human. She had cried out, arching against him as currents surged, binding them in ecstasy that bordered on annihilation. But it left her weaker each time, her humanity fraying like overused wire. "You sense it too," Abyssos murmured, his hand, fingers flickering like St. Elmo's fire, trailing up her arm. "The pull. She stirs." "Tiamat." Sibylla's voice was a whisper, barely audible over the slap of waves against the raft. The name tasted like brine on her tongue. He nodded, his form stabilizing momentarily under her gaze. "My mother. The first. Her dreams ripple through the currents. I am but a fragment, Sib. A splinter of her rage, awakened by the Carrington storm. But she remembers." The air thickened, charged with an unnatural humidity. Sibylla's skin prickled, her bioelectric sensitivity flaring like a warning beacon. She had always felt the sea's moods, the phantom currents that defied her maps, the electromagnetic whispers that guided her charts. But this was different. Deeper. A pressure building in her chest, as if the ocean pressed inward, seeking entry. She closed her eyes, trying to steady her breath, but the world tilted. Visions assaulted her, unbidden and vivid, crashing over her mind like a tidal wave. She was no longer on the raft. She stood on a shattered plain of coral and bone, the sky above a roiling mass of thunderheads that wept black rain. The ground trembled, and from the horizon rose a colossus. Tiamat, the Sea Mother, her form a leviathan beyond comprehension. Scales of abyssal black gleamed with bioluminescent veins, eyes like twin maelstroms swirling with the fury of forgotten epochs. Tentacles writhed from her maw, each tipped with barbs that crackled with primordial lightning, the same electricity that birthed Abyssos. "Son," her voice boomed, not in sound, but in seismic waves that shook Sibylla's soul. You flee from me, bound to this frail vessel of flesh. Return. The world I birthed drowns in their greed. Marduk's heirs chain my children, twist them into weapons. Join me. We will unmake them. Sibylla staggered in the vision, her hands clutching at empty air. She saw flashes. The Iron Fleet, its Faraday cages pulsing with captured leviathans, their screams echoing as electrical torment wrenched their essences into servitude. Admiral Flint's scarred face, grinning as he directed the horror, his lost arm a trophy of his hubris. Then, the drowned cities, not as ruins but as graveyards of failed bindings, human lovers of old leviathans, their bodies fused in eternal agony, flesh melted into plasma, souls dissolved into the sea's memory. And Abyssos, her Abyssos, torn from her, dragged into Tiamat's embrace, his form expanding to merge with the goddess, losing the spark of individuality she had kindled in him. The pain of that severance lanced through her, sharper than any anchor's surge. "No!" Sibylla cried, the word tearing from her throat in the real world. Her eyes snapped open, the raft spinning lazily beneath her. Sweat beaded on her brow, mingling with seawater, and her heart hammered like a telegraph key in frenzy. Abyssos was at her side in an instant, his arms encircling her, his touch a grounding shock. "Sib, what did you see?" She leaned into him, trembling. "Her, Tiamat. She's awakening Abyssos. Not fully, not yet, but the storm. It's calling her. She wants you back, wants to drown the world, to purge it." His form flickered, instability rippling through him like heat haze. "I felt it too. In the depths, her whispers. They pull at me. I am of her, Sib. Her blood, electric and salt, flows in my currents, but with you, I am more. Less boundless, perhaps, but alive in ways the ocean cannot grant." Sibylla pulled back, searching his luminous eyes. There was conflict there, a storm of his own. "You're struggling. I can feel it. Part of you wants to go to her, doesn't it? To dissolve back into the whole." He hesitated, the air between them humming with tension. "Yes, the abyss calls. It is home, endless and free. No pain of flesh, no limits of form, but you." His hand cupped her cheek, thumb tracing her lip with a spark that sent shivers down her spine. "You anchor me to this world, to desire, to the fire of touch." The words ignited something in her, a reckless heat amid the ominous chill. The premonition's terror lingered, but so did their isolation, the vast sea a witness to their forbidden union. She pressed against him, her wet shift clinging to her curves, the fabric translucent under the fading light. "Then anchor to me now. Let me remind you why you fight." Abyssos's breath hitched, a simulation of humanity he had learned from her. "Sib, the raft, the open water. It's dangerous." But she was already moving, her hands sliding under his crackling shirt, feeling the pulse of his essence beneath. "Danger is our constant. Let the sea watch." Their lips met in a clash of storm and flesh, his mouth tasting of ozone and salt. She gasped as electricity danced on her tongue, a teasing current that built with each press. His hands roamed her body, palms pressing against her breasts, thumbs circling nipples that hardened under the dual assault of his touch and the charged air. Pain bloomed where his fingers gripped too tight, but it transmuted to pleasure, her nerves alight with his power. She straddled him on the narrow raft, the wood groaning under their shifting weight. Waves lapped at the edges, as if the ocean itself urged them on. Abyssos's form solidified under her, drawn by her biofield, his hips rising to meet hers. She ground against him, feeling the hard length of his manifested desire press through his trousers, electric heat radiating. "Take me," she whispered, nipping at his jaw, tasting the faint metallic tang of plasma. "Conduct through me." With a growl that vibrated the air, He tore at her shift, the fabric shredding like paper under lightning's fury. Exposed to the cooling breeze, her skin flushed, marked already with faint scars from previous unions, silvered lines like circuit paths etched by his essence. He worshipped them with his mouth, tongue tracing each one, sending jolts that made her arch and moan. His hands guided her down, freeing himself, his member a glowing rod of plasma-veined flesh, throbbing with restrained power. She sank onto him slowly, the intrusion a shockwave of ecstasy and agony. Currents surged from him into her core, igniting every nerve, her inner walls clenching around the electric invasion. She rode him then, waves syncing with her rhythm, the raft pitching with the building storm. Pleasure coiled tight, amplified by the risk. The sea could swallow them, Tiamat's whispers could claim him mid-thrust. But in this moment, he was hers. Abyssos's hands gripped her hips, guiding her harder, faster, his pulses syncing with her heartbeat. Sib, you are my anchor, my storm. She shattered first, crying out as orgasm ripped through her, bioelectric feedback looping between them, amplifying until stars burst behind her eyes. He followed, essence flooding her in a torrent of light and heat, binding deeper than before. For a heartbeat, they were one circuit, limitless and alive. As the aftershocks faded, they collapsed together, the raft steadying. The sun had dipped below the horizon, stars pricking the velvet sky. But the whispers returned, faint now, laced with warning. Abyssos stirred, his form dimming slightly. The vision, it showed truth. She rises. The Carrington awakened me, but her slumber ends with greater fury. The fleets, the bindings, they are but sparks to her inferno. Sibylla sat up, pulling a tattered blanket over them, her body humming with residual charge. We can't run forever. The Atlas points to her trench. If we confront her, maybe we can negotiate, or stop her before she drowns everything. He laughed, a low rumble like distant thunder. Negotiate with chaos? She birthed the world from her body only to have it torn from her. But you chart the unchartable. Perhaps your maps can guide even a goddess. His internal struggle was palpable now, the pull of the abyss warring with the anchor of their bond. I fear losing myself to her, Sib, becoming the fragment again, without you. She took his hand, intertwining fingers, sparks jumping between. Then don't. Fight for this. For us. We're the Covenant, remember? Leviathan and Cartographer. We'll face her together. The sea grew restless, wind whipping up whitecaps. In the distance, a shadow on the water. Effie's submersible, approaching. But Sibylla's gaze turned inward, to the premonition's echoes. Tiamat's eyes swirling with ancient wrath, promising floods that would remake the world. Resolve hardened in her chest, a determined fire against the ominous tide. To the trench, she said, voice steady. We'll confront her. End this, or become part of it. Abyssos nodded, his essence flaring bright. Together. As the submersible drew near, the whispers from the abyss grew to a murmur, the goddess stirring in her sleep. The final confrontation loomed, humanity's fragile hope riding on a bond of flesh and lightning, salt and surrender. The raft bobbed onward, carrying them toward destiny's depths.